Today we're working in our unit on fraction operations and we're focusing on student handout number 3. This lesson is going to be about multiplying fractions. Today we're going to start out by looking at some area model pictures that are going to help us to better understand what's happening when we multiply fractions. So let's look at these examples. It says the area models below represent two multiplication problems. Use your understanding of example A to complete examples B and C. So when we look at example A, we have a multiplication problem of 2/5 times 3/4. When we look at these examples, we see that there's 5 equal sections and groupings across. And so what they did was they colored in 1, 2 out of the 5. And then we see that there's 3/4. So they colored in 1, 2, 3 out of the 4 sections that it went down. When we colored that in, we saw that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the total 20 pieces. That's where this darker shaded area came from. When we simplified that, that's really equivalent to 3/10. So let's take our understanding of this to look at example B. In example B, we see that we have 3 equal sections and they colored in 2/3, and then each of those is divided into fifths, so they colored in 3/5 sections. And what we notice is that there's 6 total pieces out of 10, but if we simplify that by dividing both by 2, we really get 3/5. So 2/3 times 3/5 is equivalent to 3/5. Oh, sorry. This should be 15. And we'll divide them both by 3, and that will equal 2/5. Sorry. Let's look at example C. So in example C, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sections down, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections across. So in this example, we're going to color in 5/6 to represent our first fraction. And then it says we have 1/4 section. So that means for both of them, this is the 1/4 area. And this area right here is the area where it overlaps, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of our total number of 24. So we're going to multiply our numerator times our numerator. 5 times 1 is 5, and our denominator times our denominator, and get 24. So 5 out of the 24 are in both sections. So let's look at the steps to get the algorithm, or the steps to multiplying fractions. So it says in order to multiply fractions and mixed number, each number must be written as a proper or an improper fraction. We can't multiply a mixed number. We have to convert the mixed number into an improper fraction before we can multiply it. Mixed numbers must be converted into improper fractions, and whole numbers must be written over the number or the denominator of 1. You have to do one or the other of those things before you can multiply a fraction. So here's our steps for multiplying fractions. Change each mixed number to an improper fraction. Step 2, multiply the numerators. And step 3, multiply the denominators. Step 4 is to simplify. So let's practice by multiplying these fractions below. So here we see we have 2/3 times 4/5. My steps say to change mixed numbers into an improper fraction. Here I don't have mixed numbers, so I can just start with step 2. Step 2 says multiply numerators. So 2 times 4 is 8. step 3 says multiply denominators. 3 times 5 is 15, and then it tells me to simplify. In this case, I know my factors of 8 are 4 and 2, and 4 is not a factor of 15, neither is 2, so I'm simplified as close as I can. Let's look at step number 2. Why don't you pause the video and solve this and then come back to check your work. So if I follow the steps for multiplying fractions above, I can't do step 1 because I do not have a mixed number to change into an improper fraction. So I'll just start with step 2. Multiply the numerators. So 6 times 2 is 12, and 7 times 7 is 49. I can't simplify any because the only factors of 49 are 7 times 7, and I know I can't divide 12 by 7. It's not a factor. Let's look at question number 3. It says, what do you notice about the product, or the answer, when you multiply two fractions that are less than 1? And what we notice when we do this is that the product, or our answer, so the product is always smaller. So this answer is always going to be smaller than the two numbers we're multiplying it by. So the product is always smaller than the two numbers that are being multiplied together. So our fractions are never going to be larger than the independent ones we're multiplying by. Let's turn it over to the back and continue multiplying fractions. So now we're going to talk about common factors. This is going to be a method we can use to help us simplify our fractions. I'm going to show you a method that will help us to simplify before we multiply our fractions so we don't have to simplify afterward. So common factors between the fractions can be simplified either before or after multiplying. So we're going to look at both ways, and you can decide which way is easier for you. So in order to simplify before we multiply fractions, we do what's called cross-canceling. That means I look at the factors that are diagonal from each other. You might have heard this called the butterfly method, or you might have called it cross-canceling. You look at the numbers that are diagonal from each other to see if they have any factors that are in common. So when I look at these two factors, I see that both the numbers are 3, and that means I can divide 3 by itself each time. If I take 3 and I divide it by 3, I get 1. And when I take 3 and divide it by 3, I get 1. Now I look at my numbers of 2 and 4. I know that they have a common factor of 2, so I'm going to divide both numbers by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now I've simplified, and all I need to do is multiply across using the same methods I did before. 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 2/3 times 3/4 is 1/2, and it's already simplified, so I don't have to go back and do that step. If I did that after the same example, what I would do is multiply the fraction 2 times 3, which is 6, and 3 times 4, which is 12. Now I would go back and simplify by dividing by the common factor of 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. So either way, I get the same answer. It's just whether you want to simplify first by cross-canceling, or if you want to simplify after multiplying the fractions by dividing by the greatest common factor. Totally your choice. So why don't you go ahead and try one or the other of those methods with number 4, and then come back and check. So what I would do for number 4 is I personally prefer to do the simplifying first by cross-canceling. So these two numbers, 3 and 9, I'm going to simplify by dividing 3 into 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. Then I'm going to cross-cancel the 4 and the 4 by dividing both by the common factor of 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1 on both examples. Now I'm going to multiply numerator by numerator and get 1, and denominator by denominator and get 3. It's already simplified, so I don't need to go back and do that. Now, number 5 is going to be a little bit different because I have mixed numbers. And I remember that my directions were that I have to turn my mixed numbers into improper fractions. And in order to do that, we need to make my fraction, what I like to call it, mad. So I do that by multiplying the denominator by the whole number. 2 times 2 is 4. And then I add that product of 4 to the numerator. So 4 plus 1 is 5. And then I leave my denominator alone of 2. I'm going to make my second fraction an improper fraction by multiplying the denominator of 5 times the whole number of 3, where I get 15, and then I'm going to add 15 plus 3, and I get 18, and I'm going to leave my denominator the same of 5. Now that I've converted both mixed numbers into improper fractions, I'm going to cross simplify. So I know that 5 and 5 have a factor of 5. If I divide 5 by 5, I get 1. And then if I look at 18 and 2, I know I can simplify them both by dividing by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And now I can multiply. 1 times 9 is 9, and 1 times 1 is 1. I know that I simplify because any number over 1 is really a whole number. So 2 and 1/2 times 3 and 3/5 is really 9. Let's look at numbers 6 and 7, which are word problems. Number 6 says a recipe requires 2 and 1/2 cups of sugar. If Mrs. Marina is going to make 1/2 of the recipe, then how much sugar does she need? So we're going to take and multiply 2 and 1/2 times 1/2 to figure out how much sugar she needs. So I know that before multiplying a mixed number, I need to convert it into an improper fraction. So I need to make my fraction mad. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 plus 1 is 5. So I'm going to take 5 halves and multiply it by 1/2. So I'm going to multiply. I can't cross cancel anything because they don't have any factors in common. So I'm just going to multiply my numerator times my numerator and my denominator by my denominator. In this case, I get an improper fraction, so I need to simplify by dividing the numerator of my fraction by the denominator. 4 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 minus 4 is 1. 1 becomes my numerator of my remainder, and 4 becomes my denominator. So I know that in order to make this recipe, she needs 1 and 1/4 cups of sugar. Let's look at example number 7. Number 7 says a rectangle, this is going to be important, has a height of 1 1/4 inches and a base of 5/6 inches. So it's asking me the area of the rectangle. I know when I'm finding the area that I'm multiplying. And what I know about a rectangle is that the top and bottom are the same length and the sides are also the same length. So this is saying the base is 5/6 inches and the height, so I should have turned my rectangle, is 1 1/4 inches. So in order to figure out the area, I need to multiply inches times inches. So I'm going to take 1 1/4 and I'm going to multiply it times 5/6. I'm going to use the same steps to turn my mixed number into an improper fraction before I multiply. So 4 times 1 is 4 plus 1 is 5. So I'm going to be multiplying 5/4 times 5/6. I can't cross simplify because they don't have anything in common, but I can multiply 5 times 5, which is 25, and then I can multiply 4 times 6 and get 24. I have an improper fraction, so I need to simplify by dividing the numerator by the denominator. 24 goes into 25 one time. 1 times 24 is 24. 25 minus 24 is 1. 1's my numerator. 24 is my denominator. So I know that the area of this is 1 and 1/24. And because I multiplied inches times inches, an area is inches squared in this case. So you should have gotten 1 and 1/24. Now let's look down at the bottom at this problem that they give us. It says use the information below, mark each statement as true or false, and then justify your choices. 4 students were each given a card with a fraction on it. They were then asked to pair up with another student and multiply the fractions. So each student, Omar, Ellie, Andre, and Ira, each got a card with a fraction on it. And we're going to look at these statements to figure out whether our answers are true or false. I'm going to use the justify box to show my work so that I can decide whether the answers to these questions are true or false. So let's look at statement A. When Omar and Andre multiplied their fraction cards, they got a product greater than 4. So I'm going to look at Omar's fraction of 1 3/4, and I'm going to multiply it times Andre's fraction of 1 5/6. I'm going to see if I get an answer greater than 4. So I'm going to have to turn my mixed numbers into improper fractions. So 4 times 1 is 4 plus 3 is 7 over 4, and I'm going to multiply that times 6 times 1 is 6 plus 5 is 11 over 6. I can't cross simplify, so I'm going to get 77 over 24, which I can't leave that way. So I'm going to divide 24 into 77. I know 24 times 2 is 48. Let's see, what is 24 times 3? I think it might be either just enough or too big. So 4 times 3 is 12. 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1 is 7. So 24 can go into 77 3 times. 3 times 24 is 72. 7 minus 2 is 5, and 7 minus 7 is 0. So I get 3 5/24. So if my answer is 3 5/24, when I multiply these together, my product is not greater than 4. So this statement is false. You go ahead and try B and C, and then come back and check your work. All right, let's look at B. If Ira multiplies her fraction by any of the other cards, the product will always be less than 1. So if we look at Ira's card, her card is 1/5. And it's saying that if we multiply 1/5 times any of these other numbers, it will give us an answer of less than 1. And in this case, this statement is true, because 1/5 times any number that's other than 5 is always going to be less than 1. So all of these cards are all less than 5. So we know her answer will always be less than 5, because all of the cards are less than the whole number of 5. It would only be greater than 1 if one of the fractions was 5 and another part of a fraction. Letter C. When Ellie and Omar multiplied their fraction cards, their solution was somewhere between 2 and 3. So let's look at their fractions. We have 2 2/7 for Ellie times 1 3/4 for Omar. So we need to turn our fractions into improper fractions before we can multiply. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 2 is 16/7, and we're going to multiply that. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7 over 4. And before we multiply, I'm going to cross simplify. I can divide both by 7 and get 1, and then I can divide both of these by 4, and I get 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. When I multiply 4 times 1, I get 4, and 1 times 1 is 1. This gives me a whole number of 4. So now I need to go back to my original question and see what I'm looking for. When Ellie and Omar multiplied their fraction cards, their solution was between 2 and 3. Well, that's false, because their answer was 4. So tonight you're going to be working on homework number 3. You're going to use all the steps that we used today to help you solve them. So this says match each correct answer to a letter and complete the riddle below. So in order to solve this, you need to solve each math problem using the steps we talked about today. And then you're going to look down for the product that you get, the answer, down here in the bottom, and your answer will equal a letter. You're going to take your card and fill in the answer to this problem. So let me show you an example with number 1. Number 1 says 4/7 times 3/8. So I'm going to cross simplify before I multiply by dividing both by 4. When I multiply 1 times 3, I get 3. When I multiply 7 times 2, I get 14. After I get my answer, I'm going to look down here at the bottom, and I see that 3/14 is the letter M. This is card number 1. So I'm going to look down here at the bottom for the same number, and I'm going to fill the letter in for that number, M. Some of them will have more than one, but you're going to find out the answer to our riddle. What do you get if you divide the circumference of a jack-o'-lantern by its diameter? So bring this tomorrow and we'll check your work.